Welcome to Critical Music 22. As you can by now tell, I am not Josh Bicknell, and I am certainly not Kyle Dumond, so that would leave you wondering who I am. Some of you know me as Steve Conger, some of you know me as jsslifelike, others as Lifelike Hero Blade, and I will be your guest host for this episode. When I had divulged my secret desire to host an episode of Critical Music, which is one of my favorites, I had told Josh that I wanted the theme to be Close Your Eyes. So that's kind of what I want you to do when you listen to CM22. Close your eyes. I want you to feel the music. I want you to be receptive to the emotion behind the music. Okay, so if you're driving, then no, I don't want you to close your eyes. But if you're stationary, give it a try. You know, you might find that listening to something without being ocularly focused on something could change the way that it affects you. The music that opened this episode was the credits screen music from the original Metroid Prime. The credits screen music is actually just a remix of the selection screen music, which is, to me, so technically organic and sort of embodies the Metroid Prime trilogy, what it was and what it will always be to me. Continuing with the Nintendo block, The Legend of Zelda, what can you say? There are a ton of great Legend of Zelda pieces, But there's a site in particular called Zelda Reorchestrated, and you can find them at zreomusic.com. They do a wonderful job at recreating, through a lot of times high-end MIDI, some of the music from the older Zeldas, and even sort of kind of cleaning up the ones from the recent ones. There's a great one you're going to hear first, which is the soundscape version of Gerudo Valley from Ocarina of Time. And the soundscape version sort of adds an environmental effect. So this has like blowing wind and vultures and things like that playing underneath the music. And it's just, it makes for a really, really nice effect. And following that is going to be one of my favorites from Twilight Princess, which was, a new take on the Lost Woods music. The Sacred Grove, which, if you remember, was kind of where Link found the Temple of Time. And that's the thing that I love about the Zelda games, is there's sort of a timeline. It's a really, really loose timeline, but there's always a throwback to a previous installment, and it's something for Nintendo files to just sit back and a big toothy grin just appears on their face. So it's kind of happening to me right now. So here's the music. The track you just heard was an electric guitar version of The True Mirror, which is the battle theme from a lesser-known GameCube RPG, Baten Kaitos. Now, for those of you who have never played Baten Kaitos, I would recommend it highly on one condition. If you turn off the voiceovers. The voice acting was horrendously done. I don't even know how it came out in the North American market with that voice talent. It was awful. But it's sort of paradoxical because it, to me, features one of the most eclectic, orchestrated soundtracks in a video game to date. It's just very, very crisp and clean and beautiful. And it reaches a plethora, like a wide range of emotions. And to me, it's something that I will never forget. And even the sequel, which was Baten Kaitos Origins, that soundtrack didn't even come close to the first game. The music prior to that was the results screen from Wii's Super Mario Strikers Charged. And that was the first online game for the Wii, and I remember being so excited and playing it, and then hearing the music on that results screen just made me want to play another match again and again and again, and it really wasn't all that fun. It was alright, but for the first outing for Nintendo really committing to a pseudo-online service, it was pretty neat for the time. Coming up next, I still wanted to stick with a little bit of Baten Kaitos because like I said, I love that soundtrack. The first track that you're going to hear is Castle in the Sand, and it's almost like an Interstellar type of sound. Like there's a little bit of funk to it, and it was to a part where they were actually going through some kind of, wormhole or something. It was rather fitting. But like I said, it explored a wide range of emotion, and the track that will follow was one that contrasted it pretty well, and the feeling of loneliness and emptiness, it really conveys that. So the second track will be titled Limpidly Flow. Okay, so we've decidedly landed at the Squaresoft portion of Critical Music 22. Now, before you say it, I know that Dearly Beloved seems a little bit cliche at this point, but it's one of my favorites, and I had to include it. But prior to that was To Xenarkand from Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy X is pretty special to me. That song was the song that forever burned that image of weapons being shoved into the ground at sunset after, pressing that start button in the beginning of the game, and then 80 hours later you find that was actually foreshadowing, and that was the final rest before heading in for the final confrontation. So that, to me, and I'm sure that my maturity had a lot to do with it at the time, was my first real foray into sort of enjoying full circle storytelling in an interactive digital medium. But moving on, next there's going to be a few tracks from one of my favorite composers, who is Yasunori Mitsuda. And one of the tracks that you're going to hear next is from the original Xenogears, and it is called Tears of the Stars, Hearts of the People, and embodies, to me, when I close my eyes, a song that it's heavy. The tone of it is heavy, but within the composition you can feel that there is a glimmer of hope. So it's treading forward no matter how bleak the situation seems. There's always a glimmer. But first, you're going to hear a track from Chrono Cross, and it is titled Leaving the Body. And even though I'm pretty sure that it didn't play when the event happened, listening to this music always reminds me of a sort of infamiliarity and being torn away from your body against your will. Not completely against your will, but how foreign that feeling would be. And this was the point where the game made such an impression on me, was where Lynx, who was the game's antagonist, had used an item called the Frozen Flame to completely switch bodies with the game's protagonist, Surge. And Surge was forced from Link's body to watch his own body stab one of his closest allies. That was On the Verge of the Assault from Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core on the PSP. Now, I could be wrong, but that reminds me of the way that I remember Final Fantasy VII. When you go back to play Final Fantasy VII, yeah, it's still a good game, but do you remember how epic it was to us when it first came out? It's almost like how War for Cybertron is dark and gritty, and it's how we remember the old Transformers episodes if you grew up with that kind of thing. When you go back and watch them, yeah, not so much. But that track pretty much embodies how gritty that I remember Midgar. Midgar was just a city overtaken by technology and greed, and the caste systems and those cast under the plates and things like that. And to me it was a great story for the time, but graphically we're used to so much more now, and that composition sort of reinvents Midgar for me. Next up is a selection from Wild Arms 3. It's entitled Only the Night Sky Knows, and it is the whistle version, and that's the reason why I selected it. Wild Arms to me has always been interesting because just for that reason, the whistle. I mean, it's always found a way to make sure that it fits the game, and obviously it's a Western theme, so yeah, it would fit. But it sort of makes it relevant, and I like that. I love the fact that Wild Arms is a bit of a change from what we know to be typical role-playing game fare and typical JRPG fare, for that matter. After that, you're going to hear a track called Home Sweet Home, and it's from something, I mean, you guys, maybe you might know it. It's from a little game, and probably the best budget game of all time, Beyond Good and Evil. That was hands down one of the best musical selections from the Castlevania series. Too bad it had to come from the worst installment of said franchise, Castlevania 64. Well, that brings us to the end of Critical Music 22. If you would like to leave comments or give input on this or any other episode of Critical Music, you may email cstrikepodcast@gmail.com or contact by Twitter at twitter.com/Critical Strike, all one word. You can contact me at twitter.com/jsslifelike, or you can visit the Gamesmen, which is the site where we post our show, at thegamesmen.com. Before I go, though, I would be remiss if I did not applaud Nacero for his dedication to this labor of love. I'm fortunate that we feature music on our show from previous installments of games on the release horizon, so I get that small little hit of crack regularly, but this is more akin to like an overdose. So I guess with Mr. Bicknell's ego re-inflated and stroked, I would like to leave you with the title theme from the game that pretty much cemented, I think, my love for role-playing games and game music. I can recall watching the attract mode from the doorway of the electronics boutique in 1995 as if it were yesterday, and the game was Phantasy Star 4.